I look back at what happened with Terry and Suarez, and this, I'd be interested in your view of do you think that's indicative of the dressing room? Do you think that was waiting to happen in football, or is it something that just, just two things that, won't happen again type of thing?
That's a very good question, Jed, and what happened between John Terry and Luis Suarez and the whole protracted process, what annoys me about the whole issue of race and discrimination is that people try and separate industries from the issue, and talk about them in isolation. Yes, there's a duty of care in football to project an image, but the issue of racism transcends football. And every footballer is a product of his home, of his community, of his schooling, everything that's nurtured into him, and then he becomes a footballer and enters into an industry, maybe with a preconceived thought, idea, suggestion, attitude, and that has the potential to manifest itself. So when you say, am I surprised? Well, through what I have seen on my journey on this issue, no, I'm not surprised. It would not surprise me if there was an issue of racism or discrimination in any industry across the world. And what I think it highlights for me is that, exactly that, no industry is safe. There's a duty of care for every employer to ensure that education is of paramount importance to their workforce, so that they can reinforce the attitudes and ideals that are appropriate for viewing in whatever their front line is.
The Kick It Out t-shirt, what was your views in terms of that, of those players? It actually turned into quite a positive thing, didn't it?
The Kick It Out t-shirts was something that was an educational process for me, because my instant reaction was one of incredulity. I stood and looked at guys who weren't going to wear their t-shirt and were going to take the power away from what I thought was a fantastic campaign and aim their thoughts and their points and anything that they were going to do at someone who's trying to work for the betterment of the issue. It was only through interaction with these guys and discussion about what their point was and why the actions were taken that I came to realise that that was the way in which their voice was heard. And it wasn't dissatisfaction directly at Kick It Out, although there were elements of that. It was their way to show dissatisfaction with how the issue was being dealt with in our industry, by the power mongers, by the anti-discrimination campaigns, and by the union. And it was after several meetings where the light bulb went on in my head, and I was like, wow, I'm in a position where I actually do get to convey my opinions. I can effect change if I take it to the right platforms. There are literally thousands, if you factor that out into society, probably millions of people who don't have a platform to air their views and air their opinions. And by boycotting the t-shirts, these players gave themselves a platform to make their points, and that point was heard. And it was a brilliant, brilliant thing, because subsequently people ran around to see what the point was, ran around to see what changes would need to be made, and hopefully, we're almost a year down the line now, we've got a time frame to actually, kind of view that change against, if that makes sense.
One of the positives from our point of view is that the PFA have asked us to project manage diversity training with current players, because it's a big ask, isn't it, when players have this role model status, and yet in some aspects of the game, like dealing with the media, they're trained, but on issues of racism and diversity, then there's no training whatsoever.
It's a huge point, and it is a must. And what you guys do here with Show Racing the Red Card, and what Kick It Out do in several of their initiatives, are fundamental to changing this, because just like we said earlier, this isn't a football issue. This is a way that we address this issue in society. So educating in schools and educating in current workplaces has to be done. And for football, this player education process is key. We can't just assume that players hold the attitudes that we find are appropriate. We can't just assume that employers, that clubs have employed people who hold and convey attitudes that are appropriate. So we need to ensure, it's our duty of care as employers, as an industry and as a union, that all of our members, that all of our employees are educated in what's acceptable. It's only then that you can start to call people up for their behaviour, because you've actually highlighted, you've brought the awareness on the issue, and then you expect a level of behaviour moving forward.
You've recently received racist abuse on Twitter.
Yes.
What was, can you tell us a little bit about that, and also how the process was dealt with? Were you happy with the outcomes in terms of how it was dealt with?
Yeah, I received some racial abuse on Twitter, as did one of my colleagues at Northampton, Adebayo Akinfenwa, one of the greatest men alive. And I am utterly delighted with how it was dealt with. If I needed a direct indication as to how things have changed, from the way that I can think of 2 incidents that were reported 4 years ago, and what happened in this case, they are so far apart, it is utterly ludicrous. I retweeted this offensive statement in order to expose the person who said it, and then thought nothing else of it because I was in another meeting for the rest of the afternoon. By the time that I'd come back to my phone, the police had investigated it, the football clubs had collaborated on finding the individual, they'd gotten his address from Facebook and some other social network, and he'd been arrested. All in the matter of about 4 hours. Now that is utterly phenomenal. It really is. That is, even though social media gave an individual the power to abuse, it also gave the police force and community and society the power to react. And I thought that was a phenomenal process. The only point that I would raise is that I and B, Adebayo Akinfenwa, were prominent people within our communities. Now, I'm sure that expedited the process somewhat, and what I want is, or what I would love to see, is that type of reaction and the speed and gravity of that just factoring down into general social media use, because it's such a it's a media that's exploded, and when something grows so quickly, governing it and policing it are very, very different. But this case has shown how it can be done, and how it can be done, with phenomenal pace and success. And subsequently, the gentleman has been in court. He's written letters of apology to myself and to B, and he's been ordered to pay compensation to the pair of us, and both of us have donated that to charity. So it's excellent.
Recently the BBC contacted us about footballers and cars, and the issue of being stopped and searched. Have you had problems with that kind of thing?
Now, my evidence in this is unfounded because it's only my experience. I would say that in my 10 or 12 years, however long it is as a driver, I've maybe been stopped between 15 and 20 times, and there are only 2 times where it was for no reason other than to see where I am and what I'm doing. So I would say 2 times a general stop and search over, when you're 99, so I was like 14 years, that's not bad. But then that's my personal experience. Yeah, so I can't say that I can add to the experience that stop and search has intruded my life and is blah blah blah. That's not been my experience.
What's your views on the Rooney Rule?
One of the biggest problems that we have in football, and actually I'm going to factor that out into the upper echelons of the majority of industries, is that they are closed. Is that there's a very nepotistic element to the way that appointments are made, and history says that race has been a huge factor in the jobs that people have received, and and the promotions that they've gotten. So if at the top of industries we still have the same demographic who are holding ideals of maybe generations past. Now, I don't want to say everyone, because that's another sweeping generalisation, but the facts and figures don't generally lie, then that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy if the recruitment process isn't changed. Now, we can affect that in football, and we have direct evidence that shows that the level of opportunity for BME candidates is vastly reduced. We've looked into the selection pool, the qualified selection pool, which is growing year on year. So through education and coaching badges, etc., etc., that has been adjusted over the last 10 years. But we are still not seeing the progression into actual jobs. Now, there has to be a balance struck here, because there are only 92 jobs in management ever available at one time, and most of those are quite secure in their job. But when it comes to coaches and players coming through the backroom staff of a football club, that's not the case, and the recruitment process of that needs to be opened up too. So if you implement a process where you have 10 candidates and 2 must be of BME background, then that does 2 things. First of all, it ensures that 10 people get their CVs seen by a board. Now, that people say it's positive discrimination, but it is quite the opposite, because what usually happens is that boards decide who's getting the job before they release whoever's in the role. This means that 10 people get their CVs to be put before a board. That means there are 8, let's say, Caucasian or majority applicants and 2 BME applicants. And what that does, it gets people in the system. So even if 9 of those 10 people don't get the job, 9 of those 10 people are on the radar. And when another job comes up somewhere else, that board may say, do you know what, we saw an excellent CV, a guy who impressed us in an interview, put him down on your list, and this person is now getting to the king's table instead of trying to feed off the crumbs. It really is an honour for me to take an ambassadorial role for Show Racing the Red Card. I've been involved in so many different initiatives in my journey as a footballer and as part of the union, but the work that Show Racing the Red Card, and you in particular, Jed, have done on the budget that you've done it and the way that you've expanded, I'm proud to be a part of that. Yeah, I just really look forward to adding my experience to hopefully help educate the educators, and also to educate, more importantly, the next generation of young men and women, the future of our society.